Hello, today's story takes place in Malaysia. Malaysia is a multi-ethnic country with a population of over 30 million people, of which more than 70% are Bumiputra, including the indigenous Malays who form the majority, and some other minority ethnic groups. The Bumiputra hold a dominant position in politics, while the Chinese, who make up more than 20% of the population, play a crucial role in the economy, especially in sectors such as housing, finance, and education. However, the policy of prioritizing Bumiputra in certain sectors like education and housing has caused certain social conflicts. This policy has also contributed to a brain drain. Furthermore, some officials intentionally incite racial issues. For instance, a politician once said, "The Chinese should not dream of having both rights and benefits like the Jews in America." However, this statement was widely criticized. The main character in today's story is a Chinese woman, a 22-year-old young lady named Sam Ke Ting, also known as Sam Ke Ting. At 3:20 a.m. on February 18, 2017, after attending the Chingay Festival, Ke Ting was driving home. Upon reaching a gas station on the Inner Ring Road in Johor Bahru, she noticed the road was steep and poorly lit. She drove very cautiously for fear of an accident. However, the unexpected happened. A large dark figure suddenly darted out from the roadside trees at high speed, blocking all three lanes. Ke Ting immediately hit the brakes but couldn't avoid the collision. The airbags deployed, and the car, initially in the middle lane, was thrown to the left lane. Ke Ting stepped out of the car in shock, facing a horrifying scene. Several teenagers lay scattered on the ground, some groaning in pain. Others lay motionless. The curious crowd gathered quickly, and ambulances and police soon arrived at the scene. Outraged locals surrounded Ke Ting, continuously criticizing and cursing at her. Some even smashed and overturned her car, apparently to rescue the children trapped underneath. Realizing the situation was deteriorating, a police officer quickly whisked Ke Ting away from the scene and took her statement. According to the police investigation, Ke Ting had collided with a large group of about 30 to 40 bicyclists, resulting in severe injuries and fatalities. The accident caused the deaths of 6 teenagers on the spot. 2 more died on the way to the hospital, 2 were seriously injured, and 6 sustained minor injuries. The accident quickly became a hot topic in the media. Due to the severe damage to the front of the car and the chaotic scene, many speculated that the female driver had been using her phone or speeding, which led to the catastrophic accident. They contended that the speed limit on the accident road was 50 km. If she was driving that slowly, she couldn't have caused such a significant casualty. However, as the investigation deepened, the teenagers were also found to be at fault. The bicycles they rode had been modified from mini bicycles, with many essential parts like lights and brakes removed. All these modifications aim to increase the bike's speed. These racers even formed their own club. To fulfill their racing needs, they often gathered and raced downhill from the hilltop, reaching speeds of over 70 km/h. To reduce wind resistance, upon reaching a certain speed, they would lie flat on the bike seat, mimicking professional cyclists. This dangerous riding style was called mosquito, due to the posture resembling a mosquito sucking blood. This hazardous activity was, of course, banned by the police and parents. Hence, these racers usually chose very late at night or early dawn for their races. 2 days before the accident, about 60 teenagers had gathered to race at the same location. The police arrested 20 of them. In fact, this dangerous modified bicycle racing has been popular among the youth for years. However, due to the lack of specific legal regulations on these types of bicycles, and the fact that the violators were minors, the maximum penalty was only vehicle confiscation and parental bail. Such a light penalty couldn't deter illegal racing. Moreover, the small, compact, and agile modified bikes allowed young racers to easily evade police pursuits. While fleeing, they even brazenly weaved through traffic and taunted the police. The group of teenagers Ke Ting collided with was racing at top speed downhill. Most of the victims wore dark clothing. None wore reflective vests. The bicycles had no lights or reflective stickers, and no warning signals were given before the accident. The accident site was an area near an Islamic cemetery, poorly lit with dense trees obstructing the view. Furthermore, this section of the road is sloped, which further limits visibility. More importantly, subsequent investigations by the police determined that Ke had not violated any traffic laws while driving. She wasn't using her phone, wasn't overloading the vehicle, wasn't driving under the influence, nor did she break any other regulations. Consequently, public opinion began to shift. Initially empathetic towards the victims, many people turned to support Kayazadan. They believed that in this accident, the blame clearly lay with the group of teenagers on bicycles. However, some others argued that while the victims had to pay for their actions, Na should also bear responsibility. Various factors and conflicting opinions made the case incredibly complex. If convicted of causing death by reckless driving, Ne would face a minimum of 2 years imprisonment and a maximum of 10 years, along with a fine ranging from 5,000 to 20,000 ringgit, equivalent to approximately 29,000 to 118,000 VND at the current exchange rate. Unexpectedly, the case dragged on for 6 years, attracting significant public and political attention. Due to the case's complexity and far-reaching impact, the government had to mobilize multiple agencies for the investigation. Anyone who regularly follows legal cases knows that preserving the crime scene is crucial, regardless of whether it is a traffic accident or a murder case. However, in this case, there was no dashcam in the car, nor were there street surveillance cameras to provide visual evidence of the accident. Moreover, after the collision, a hostile crowd not only insulted Ke Ting, but also disrupted the scene, complicating the investigation. A straightforward example is that post-impact, the car had actually stopped by the roadside. However, when the police arrived on the scene, they found the vehicle overturned. Upon questioning local residents, the police learned that the car had been flipped over to rescue a teenager trapped beneath it. 3 months after the accident, during legal proceedings, realized that the legal expenses far exceeded what she could afford on a saleswoman's salary of 1,000 ringgit. Some sources say 2,000 ringgit, approximately 1.6 million VND. She had exhausted her personal savings and her family's. Currently, she could not afford further expenses. Desperate, she turned to social media for help. Unexpectedly, her post received overwhelming support from netizens. Within just 5 hours of posting, she raised 60,000 ringgit, equivalent to about 352 million VND. On March 28, 2017, the trial for the case of Nevin driving causing death due to carelessness or dangerous driving commenced at the Johor Bahru lower court. Investigator Ko Beng Ingaman In argued that the accident resulted from the driver's inattentiveness. That did not focus while driving and did not observe changes in visibility. Clearly, the driving conditions at the scene were poor, but she did not drive more cautiously to avoid the accident. In summary, he drove at high speed and carelessly, leading to a loss of control, inability to brake in time, causing the deaths of 8 people and injuring 8 others. Beng Ningyian's argument was based on the investigation results from the Malaysian Institute of Road Safety Search, MyROS. Due to the disturbance of the scene and the vehicle, MyROS mentioned, there were 2 initial collision points, making it impossible to determine the original collision point between Nis car and the group of cyclists. If the collision point were the first point, the vehicle's speed could be 74.86 km/h. If it were the second point, the speed could be 4.53 km/h. These 2 figures are noteworthy because the speed limit on the accident stretch is 50 km/h. These 2 possibilities lead to 2 completely different conclusions: speeding or not speeding. In court proceedings, if multiple possibilities arise, courts usually favor the option advantageous to the defendant. However, Beng Ningyian argued that no clear brake marks were found at the scene, and the airbags only deployed after colliding with a hard object. Meanwhile, the individuals Kate collided with were not hard objects. They concluded that she hit the group of teenagers at high speed, causing the airbags to deploy. Hence, her car's speed must have been 74.86 km/h. However, the judge found that the investigator was too harsh on the defendant. In the early morning, on a sloped road with limited visibility, an unexpected appearance of a group of cyclists riding against traffic was entirely unpredictable for the driver. Moreover, the cyclists did not give any warning signals to alert the driver to avoid the path. The judge also found no evidence proving the defendant was reckless while driving. On October 28, 2019, after summoning 46 witnesses and examining 214 pieces of evidence, the court declared Kara Dubran not guilty. The Johor Bahru lower court ruled that Kadini is not guilty and declared her acquitted without requiring her to appear in court. So, what does not guilty mean? During the trial, the judge will ask the defendant if they plead guilty or not guilty. If the defendant pleads not guilty, like Kadin did, the trial enters the stage of determining the defendant's guilt. Conversely, if the defendant's guilt cannot be proven, then the defendant's guilt will be considered not guilty, and the defendant will be set free. Simply put, the judge found the evidence of the defendant's guilt insufficient to convict Kadin, and thus declared her acquitted. Of course, the prosecution did not accept this ruling. On November 10, 2019, they appealed to the Johor Bahru High Court. On February 8, 2021, the High Court overturned the previous not guilty verdict and summoned Kadin to the lower court to defend herself. 8 months later, after hearing Kadin's self-defense, the lower court once again declared she is not guilty, and she was released immediately in court. Up until now, there have not been many signs of interference from any hidden forces. In fact, the prosecution could not prove that Ke Ting was driving carelessly or dangerously, and therefore they could not convict her. However, an unexpected turn of events occurred. The situation quickly shifted unfavorably for Ke Ting. Out of nowhere, a wave of fierce opposition arose on social media. They exploited the fact that Ke Ting is of Chinese descent, while the victims were Malay, to incite racial tensions. Some media outlets deliberately posted sorrowful images of the victims' families to attract attention, making public opinion even more outraged. More moderate voices suggested that although, legally, the victims were more at fault, they had still lost their lives. Therefore, from a moral perspective, Ke Ting should at least apologize and compensate the victims' families. Some even believed that it was understandable if she had to go to prison. The story escalated further. Some radical netizens made racist remarks, openly attacked Ke Ting, dug up her personal and family information, and declared that she must be sentenced to death to be held accountable for the deaths of the 8 victims. In reality, a segment of the Malaysian population still holds the view that Malay people are superior, believing that Malays are the true owners of Malaysia, while Chinese and Indians are merely freeloaders in the country. When such extremist views are exploited, a simple traffic accident turns into a far more complex issue, exceeding the bounds of the law. On October 12, 2021, the prosecution continued appeal to the Johor Bahru High Court. By April 13, 2022, High Court Judge Abu Bakar unexpectedly reversed the previous verdict and declared Ke Ting guilty of causing death by reckless or dangerous driving, sentencing her to 6 years in prison and a 6,000 ringgit fine. If she fails to pay the fine, she will face an additional 6 months in prison. Additionally, after her prison term, her driver's license will be revoked for 3 years, and the accident will be recorded on her driving record. Her requests for bail and postponement of the sentence execution were denied by the court. She was immediately taken into custody. The verdict caused a shockwave in Malaysian public opinion, with not only the Chinese community but also many Malays voicing opposition to this seemingly unfair verdict against Ke Ting. So, what basis did the judge use to convict Ke Ting? First, it must be affirmed that after being convicted, Ke Ting had 3 options to defend herself. First, she could swear an oath and present evidence in court, the most reliable method, as the defendant would be cross-examined during their defense. Second, she could defend herself without taking an oath, which is less reliable as the defendant would not be cross-examined. Third, she could remain silent. Ke Ting chose the second option. Perhaps her defense attorney advised this to avoid the risk of her being trapped by the prosecution during cross-examination. Below is a part of Ke Ting's testimony. That evening, she was driving home with a friend. Her friend's car was right behind hers. Since she did not live nearby, she was unaware of the bike racing activities that often occurred at night. There were no warning signs on the road. She was driving within the speed limit, staying in the leftmost lane. When passing the gas station, she noticed limited visibility. As she approached the slope, she did not see the group of bikes. It was only when she reached the top of the slope, near a bend, that she suddenly saw a group of modified bike riders sprawled across all lanes. She then heard a loud crash and became incredibly scared. Additionally, she provided a new statement, indicating that another car had crashed into the group of teenagers and fled the scene during the ensuing chaos. This new testimony, along with her refusal to be questioned, led the judge to believe that she was being set up to evade responsibility. As a result, all of Chanderu's testimony was dismissed. The judge almost exclusively listened to the one-sided argument from the prosecution. Consequently, he accepted the prosecution's investigation results, concluding that No had been driving at a speed of 74.86 km. The judge also noted that his ignorance of the local cycling race could not be a justification for her dangerous driving behavior. She was driving over the speed limit in conditions with limited visibility. After hitting someone, instead of braking, she continued driving out of control, causing serious casualties. The judge further stated that Chanderu showed no remorse, firmly denied the charges, and therefore did not qualify for a reduced sentence. Considering this was her first offense, the court decided to sentence her to 6 years in prison and fined her 6,000 ringgits. The judge emphasized that the community's interests must be placed above individual interests. The verdict pleased the victims' families greatly. They said they had been waiting for justice for 5 years. One mother shared that she frequently woke up in the middle of the night searching for her son, only to be jolted back to the harsh reality that he was no longer alive. In response to criticisms that the parents had not adequately supervised their children, this mother felt it was an insult to the families of the victims. They had endured the immense pain of losing their children. Punishing the female driver was to make her pay for her actions, and it also served as a cautionary lesson to everyone to drive more carefully. Finally, when asked by reporters if she would forgive the family, she tearfully said, "I don't know how to describe my feelings right now, but my heart feels more at peace." Regarding Cuz Onuno, her lawyer immediately filed an appeal. The petition to reduce the sentence quickly gained support from millions of people. Many Chinese politicians and businessmen declared they would provide her with free legal aid. Ultimately, thanks to the efforts of the lawyers and the strong support from the Chinese community, on April 18, 2021, the Court of Appeals accepted Chanderu's appeal and temporarily suspended the High Court of Johor Bahru's ruling, allowing her to be released on bail. After 5 days in prison, Chanderu was freed. Both the prosecution and the defense continued into the final trial, awaiting the court's decision. Some observant individuals might have noticed that the prosecution made a mistake from the beginning. They accused Chanderu of reckless or dangerous driving leading to death. However, these are actually two separate charges, which cannot be combined into one accusation, because a person cannot be simultaneously accused of both manslaughter and murder. Since dangerous driving and reckless driving share similarities, it is easy to confuse the two. Chanderu's new lawyer, Mr. Chang Potek, identified this critical point. On April 11, 2023, A panel of 3 judges, led by Mrs. Hadadia, unanimously decided to overturn the previous High Court ruling on the grounds of invalid allegations. A verdict based on an invalid charge is also invalid. To better understand why the court rejected the allegation, we need to explore how judges convict a defendant. A trial is a confrontation between the prosecution and the defense. The defense must present reasonable doubts, while the prosecution must address these doubts. When the judge believes that all reasonable doubts have been satisfactorily addressed, that the evidence exceeds the threshold, dispelling any reasonable doubt, the defendant is convicted. In simple terms, the judge must be entirely convinced of the defendant's guilt without any unresolved doubts. If there are still unanswered questions, the defendant is acquitted because the principle of the presumption of innocence is upheld. Therefore, the prosecution must provide full, clear, and logical evidence without gaps to convict K.A. Zing. But what was the reality? As mentioned earlier, the Johor Bahru trial court had repeatedly declared A.K. Ryu innocent due to numerous unresolved doubts, insufficient grounds for her conviction. The judge even criticized the prosecution for presenting unconvincing evidence, witnesses with conflicting testimonies, and an incomplete, unserious investigation. The dialogue below shows that even identifying the vehicle operator was vague and inaccurate in the investigator's report. K. Themturan also asserted that the investigation was incomplete and that police only investigated her because she was the only Chinese woman at the scene. Remember that Kai Dundru Nadu testified that another car had hit the group of teenagers. This sounded like a hasty fabrication to evade guilt. However, the forensic results showed that only the paint from 2 makeshift bicycles was found on her car. Moreover, the evidence indicated that these 2 bicycles had also collided with each other. This suggests 2 possibilities. The 2 bikes collided after hitting Kayatan W. Na's car, or the bicycle group collided before being hit by her car. Furthermore, evidence also indicated that Kayadaru Na's car had collided with 2 other vehicles. Therefore, it cannot be confirmed that all 8 deaths and 8 injuries were caused by her. It's highly possible that other perpetrators involved in the accident had fled. However, due to the absence of dashcam footage and other recording devices after the accident, the scene and evidence were disrupted, coupled with unconvincing police investigations and conflicting witness testimonies, making the case very complex. The unclear evidence was insufficient to convict K. Duru Nana. Additionally, as mentioned, the prosecution asserted that the car's speed at the time was 74.86 km/h because the airbags had deployed and no brake marks were found at the scene. However, the car manufacturer indicated that airbags typically deploy when the car is traveling above 25 km/h and hits a hard object. Hence, the judge found that the deployment of airbags could not be used as evidence to prove Kai Chru No was speeding. Additionally, the lack of brake marks at the scene was due to the car's anti-lock braking system and ABS being activated. This not only proved that she had braked in time, but also explained why her car had skidded from the middle lane to the left lane. In conclusion, the appellate court held that Kadavanun was not speeding due, and even if she were, it did not equate to dangerous driving. The fact that a group of 40 people on modified bicycles blocked all lanes while coming down a reverse slope meant that Kite Dodred that could not have avoided a collision regardless in was it was which was in gars of which lane she or her speed. Judge HHTA even bluntly stated that the only way to avoid the accident would have been for the car to fly over the group of cyclists. With just a few questions, she rendered the prosecution speechless, unable to provide any counterarguments. Ultimately, the court unanimously declared the previous verdict groundless, the evidence insufficient to convict Killert Trubelninch. The accident was not caused by her. K.A. Zerdan Dudru was acquitted on the spot without needing to offer any further testimony. This was the final ruling, with no right to appeal. The case, dragged on for 6 years with numerous complications, finally concluded. The radiant smile that once graced the young woman's face returned at last. At a subsequent press conference, she expressed her regrets towards the victims. "I acknowledge that the car I was driving took the lives of your beloved children, but I affirm that this accident was never my intention. I deeply regret what happened to you and your families. During the 6 grueling years of the trial, I never stopped questioning myself, feeling tormented and constantly thinking about the victims' plans and dreams, about the happy lives they were enjoying with their families. My words cannot soothe the pain you are enduring, nor can they bring back those unfortunate children. However, I want you to know that I am also suffering the same anguish and torment as you. Following this case, Malaysian police increased monitoring and imposed stricter penalties on makeshift bicycle racing activities, helping to somewhat reduce the likelihood of similar tragic accidents. Nonetheless, Kai Edlerdodo continued to face criticism and denunciation from some victims' families and sections of the public. It will likely take her a considerable amount of time to fully escape the substantial shadow of that fateful accident. Finally, let's learn a bit about Judge Hathadia. She was the judge who sentenced 6 defendants to death in the murder by mask case, which shocked Malaysian public opinion. In 2017, several dozen cadets from the Malaysian Defense Academy committed a gruesome murder using a steam iron. However, the defendants were only convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 18 years in prison. Judge Hathadia discovered errors in the previous verdict and decided to sentence the 6 ringleaders to death while increasing the sentences of the remaining defendants. The case closed, but its echoes remain as a reminder about traffic law compliance and the lurking dangers of illegal racing games. And most importantly, it's about a society that needs empathy and understanding instead of division and incitement of hatred. The story of K.A. Sriyers is a wake-up call for all of us. Cherish the lives of yourself and those around you, and live more responsibly for both yourself and the community. Because just a moment of negligence or carelessness can cost us our lives, or worse, condemn us to a lifetime of torment and haunting memories.